The dust cloud rose behind the stagecoach as it barreled toward Panamint, California, carrying a woman who would change everything Gabriel Norton thought he knew about himself. It was the summer of 1878, and Gabriel had been working the same cattle ranch outside town for the better part of 5 years. At 26, he had weathered hands, sun-darkened skin, and a reputation for being steady and reliable. He was not flashy, did not drink to excess, and kept his word when he gave it. The ranch owner, Samuel Hayes, trusted him with more responsibility than most of the other hands, and Gabriel took pride in earning his keep honestly. That particular afternoon, Gabriel had ridden into Panamint to pick up supplies. The town sat in a valley surrounded by the Panamint Mountains, a rough and tumble place where miners sought silver and fortune seekers came hoping to strike it rich. The streets were dusty, the buildings mostly wood and canvas, and the saloons outnumbered the churches 3-1. Gabriel tied his horse outside the general store and was loading sacks of flour and beans onto his pack horse when he heard the commotion. The stagecoach had arrived and passengers were climbing down. Most were men, rough-looking types who would likely head straight for the nearest saloon or mining claim. But then a woman stepped down, and Gabriel found himself staring. She wore a practical traveling dress in dark blue, dusty from the journey but well made. Her hair was a rich brown, pinned up neatly despite the long ride. But it was not her appearance that caught his attention so much as the way she carried herself. She stood tall, surveying the town with an expression that suggested she was assessing and judging everything she saw. When the stage driver tried to hand down her trunk carelessly, she spoke sharply. "Careful with that. It contains books and papers that cannot be replaced." The driver muttered something under his breath, but he set the trunk down more gently. Gabriel watched as she looked around, clearly searching for something or someone. Her gaze passed over him without interest, and he felt oddly disappointed. He finished loading his supplies and was about to mount up when he heard her voice again, this time directed at a man who had been loitering near the stage. "Excuse me, could you direct me to the school building?" The man looked her up and down with an expression Gabriel did not like. "We got a school, but ain't nobody teaching in it right now. Last teacher left 2 months back." "I am aware," she said crisply. "I am Eleanor Dalton, the new teacher. Now, if you would be so kind as to direct me." The man scratched his beard. "Well now, pretty thing like you might want to reconsider. This town ain't exactly refined. I did not ask for your opinion on my choices. I asked for directions." Gabriel found himself walking over before he had fully decided to do so. "The school is 2 streets over, madam." "I can show you if you like." She turned to him and he got his first good look at her eyes. They were green, sharp, and intelligent, and they sized him up in about 2 seconds flat. "Thank you. That would be helpful." She looked at her trunk. "I will need to arrange for this to be moved as well." "I can take it on my pack horse," Gabriel offered. "I am heading that direction anyway." This was not strictly true, as the school was in the opposite direction from the ranch, but Gabriel found he did not mind the detour. Eleanor nodded briskly. "That is kind of you, Mr. Norton." Gabriel Norton. Mr. Norton. She waited while he lifted her trunk. It was heavy as she had warned, and he could feel the weight of books inside. He secured it on the pack horse, then led both animals down the street while Eleanor walked beside him. "You are a cowboy, Mr. Norton." "I work cattle at the Hayes Ranch, yes, madam." "And you live in Panamint, at the ranch, mostly. Come into town for supplies and the occasional social gathering." She was quiet for a moment, taking in the rough buildings, the men standing outside the saloons, the general atmosphere of a mining town in its prime. Gabriel wondered what she thought of it. Most women who came to places like this did so, because they had no other choice or because they were following a husband or father. But Eleanor Dalton had come alone, deliberately, to teach school. "It is rougher than I expected," she said finally, and Gabriel appreciated that she was honest about it. "It is a hard town," he agreed. "But there are good people here too. Children who need teaching, families trying to build something lasting." She glanced at him with what might have been approval. "That is why I came. I believe education is essential, regardless of circumstances." They reached the school building, which was a simple wooden structure with a peaked roof and windows on either side. It sat at the edge of town, with a small house behind it that Gabriel knew was meant for the teacher. "That is the teacher's residence," he said, pointing. "It is not much, but it should be weather-tight." Eleanor surveyed both buildings with her hands on her hips. "I have lived in worse." "Thank you for your help, Mr. Norton." He unloaded her trunk and carried it up the steps to the little house. The door was unlocked, and inside was a single room with a stove, a narrow bed, a table, and 2 chairs. It was clean, at least, and there were shelves built into one wall. Gabriel set the trunk down carefully and turned to find Eleanor already examining everything with a critical eye. "The stove works, should do. I can check it for you if you like, please." He knelt and opened the stove door, checking the flue and the grate. Everything seemed in order, and there was even wood stacked beside it. He stood and brushed off his hands. "Looks good. You will want to get some supplies, food and such. The general store can set you up. I intend to go there this afternoon." She paused, then added, "You have been very helpful, Mr. Norton. I appreciate it." Gabriel found himself wanting to linger, which was unlike him. He was usually content with his own company, not given to seeking out conversation. But something about this woman intrigued him. "If you need anything, the Hayes Ranch is about 5 miles north of town. Anyone can point you the way. I will keep that in mind." He touched the brim of his hat and left, leading his horses back toward the main street. Behind him, he could hear Eleanor beginning to unpack, the sounds of her moving around in the little house. He wondered what had brought her to Panamint, what made a woman choose to come alone to a rough mining town to teach children. But it was none of his business, and he had work waiting back at the ranch. Still, as he rode north with the afternoon sun slanting across the mountains, Gabriel found his thoughts returning to Eleanor Dalton and her sharp green eyes. The following Sunday, Gabriel rode into town for the weekly gathering at the community hall. It was not quite church, though a circuit preacher came through once a month to hold services. Mostly it was a chance for families to socialize, for men to talk business, and for the few women in town to share news and recipes. Gabriel usually attended because Samuel Hayes expected him to, representing the ranch in the owner's absence when Hayes was traveling. He was surprised to see Eleanor Dalton there, standing near the refreshment table with a cup of lemonade in her hands. She wore a different dress today, still practical but lighter in color, and her hair was arranged in a softer style. Several of the town's women had surrounded her, clearly curious about the new teacher. Gabriel helped himself to coffee and found a place to stand where he could observe without being obvious about it. He watched as Eleanor answered questions, her manner polite but reserved. When one of the older women, Mrs. Patterson, asked rather pointedly why a young woman like herself was not married, Eleanor's response carried clearly across the room. "I have strong opinions about how I wish to live my life, Mrs. Patterson. Not all men appreciate that in a wife." There was a moment of shocked silence, and then Mrs. Patterson laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "Well, I suppose that is honest enough. Good for you, dear." Gabriel found himself grinning into his coffee cup. There was something refreshing about Eleanor's directness, the way she refused to apologize for being herself. He liked it, As the gathering continued, he noticed several of the unmarried men in town trying to catch Eleanor's attention. There was Tom Briggs, who owned a small mining claim, and Henry Walsh, who ran the livery stable. Both were decent enough men, though Gabriel knew Tom had a temper when he drank, and Henry was known for being tight with his money. Gabriel stayed where he was, content to watch. He was not much for competing with other men, and besides, a woman like Eleanor Dalton would make her own choices. She did not seem the type to be swayed by flattery or persistence. The afternoon wore on, and Gabriel was about to leave when Eleanor appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Norton." "I hoped I would see you here." He turned, surprised. "Madam, I wanted to thank you again for your help when I arrived, and I wondered if I might ask your advice about something." "Of course." She led him away from the crowd, out onto the porch of the community hall where they could speak more privately. The evening was coming on, cooling the air, and the mountains were turning purple in the fading light. "I have been in town for a week now," Eleanor began, "and I have been preparing the school to open. I have met some of the families, and most are supportive. But there is a problem." Gabriel waited, sensing she needed to work up to whatever was troubling her. "One of the men on the town council, Cyrus Thorne, has been making difficulties. He says the town cannot afford to pay a teacher right now, that the funds have been allocated elsewhere. But I spoke with the mayor, and he says the money is there. I believe Mr. Thorne simply does not approve of having a woman in the position." Gabriel was not surprised. Cyrus Thorne owned the largest saloon in town and had his fingers in several less reputable enterprises. He was the kind of man who liked to control things, and he would not appreciate Eleanor's independence. "Thorne is trouble," Gabriel said carefully. "But he does not run this town alone. If the mayor supports you and most of the families want their children educated, Thorne cannot stop you." "I hope you are right." Eleanor looked out at the darkening sky. "I do not intend to be run off. I came here to do a job, and I will do it." "I believe you will." Gabriel found himself admiring her determination. "If Thorne gives you real trouble, let me know, or talk to Samuel Hayes. He has got influence in town, and he is not afraid of Thorne." Eleanor smiled, a real smile that softened her features and made her look younger. "Thank you, Mr. Norton. It is good to know I have at least one ally here. More than one, I would wager. You impressed Mrs. Patterson today. That counts for something." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and Gabriel was aware of how easy it felt to be in her presence. There was no need to fill every moment with words, no awkwardness. It was unusual, and he found himself reluctant to leave. "I should be getting back to the ranch," he said finally. "But I meant what I said. If you need help, you can find me there." "I will remember." Gabriel rode home slowly, his mind full of Eleanor Dalton and the way she had sought him out specifically to ask for advice. It meant she trusted him, at least a little, and that mattered more than it probably should. The school opened 2 weeks later on a Monday morning in early July. Eleanor had spent the intervening time visiting every family with school-age children, convincing reluctant parents that education was worth the time their children would spend away from work. It was not easy. Most of the families in Panamint were struggling, and children were expected to contribute however they could, whether helping with younger siblings, working claims with their fathers, or doing odd jobs around town. But Eleanor was persuasive. She argued that educated children would have better opportunities, that they would be able to keep accounts, write letters, and understand contracts. She promised to work around harvest times and family needs. Slowly, she won them over. On that first Monday, 15 children showed up at the school, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Eleanor stood at the door greeting each one, learning their names, making them feel welcome. Gabriel, who had ridden into town on an errand for Samuel Hayes, stopped by to see how things were going. Through the window, he could see Eleanor at the front of the room, writing on the slate board. The children sat at rough wooden desks, some sharing, all watching her with varying degrees of interest or skepticism. Her voice carried through the open window, clear and confident as she introduced the day's lessons. Gabriel felt an unexpected surge of pride, as if Eleanor's success was somehow connected to him. It was foolish, he knew. He had done nothing but carry her trunk and offer some advice. But still, he was glad she had managed to open the school despite Cyrus Thorne's interference. As if summoned by the thought, Thorne himself appeared, riding down the street on a showy black horse. He pulled up when he saw Gabriel and dismounted with a swagger. "Norton, come to see the new teacher." "Just passing through," Gabriel said evenly. He did not like Thorne, and he saw no reason to pretend otherwise. Thorne looked at the schoolhouse with a derisive expression. "Waste of time and money, if you ask me. These miners' brats do not need book learning. They need to learn how to work." "Nobody asked you," Gabriel pointed out, "and the families seem happy enough to send their children. For now." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "But when winter comes and times get hard, they will pull them out quick enough. Miss Dalton will find herself with an empty school and no pay. Maybe. Or maybe she will prove you wrong." Thorne stepped closer, and Gabriel could smell whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. "You seem mighty interested in the lady teacher, Norton. Got your eye on her." Gabriel met his gaze steadily. "That is none of your concern." "Everything in this town is my concern." Thorne's voice hardened. "You would do well to remember that, and maybe warn your friend Miss Dalton to watch her step." With that, he mounted his horse and rode off toward his saloon. Gabriel watched him go, feeling uneasy. Thorne was the kind of man who held grudges, and he clearly saw Eleanor as some kind of threat or challenge. Gabriel made a mental note to keep an eye on the situation. Inside the school, Eleanor continued teaching, unaware of the conversation outside. Gabriel watched for a moment longer, then mounted his own horse and headed back to the ranch. But his mind was troubled. Thorne's warning had sounded like a threat, and Gabriel did not like the idea of Eleanor being vulnerable in town while he was miles away at the ranch. Over the next several weeks, Gabriel found reasons to visit Panamint more often than strictly necessary. He told himself it was prudent to keep an eye on things, to make sure Thorne did not cause trouble. But he knew the truth was simpler and more complicated. He wanted to see Eleanor. He stopped by the school sometimes in the late afternoon when classes were ending, helping her carry water from the well or chop wood for the stove against the coming winter. Eleanor accepted his help with gracious efficiency, never making a fuss, but always offering thanks. They fell into easy conversation during these visits, talking about everything from the students' progress to the politics of the town to their own histories. Gabriel learned that Eleanor had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a schoolteacher father and a mother who had died when Eleanor was young. She had been educated at a women's college, unusual for the time, and had taught in several schools before deciding to come west. "I wanted to make a real difference," she explained one afternoon as they sat on the school steps watching the sunset. "In Boston, there were plenty of teachers. But out here there is such a need. Children growing up without any education, without any chance to better themselves. I thought I could help change that." "You are brave," Gabriel said. "Coming out here alone, taking on this challenge." Eleanor shook her head. "Not brave, just determined. I have strong opinions about what matters in life, and education is one of them." Gabriel found himself grinning. "I noticed that about you." She raised an eyebrow. "And does that bother you, Mr. Norton?" "I have found that many men prefer women who do not have opinions, or at least do not voice them. I am not many men, Gabriel said. And no, it does not bother me. I like that you know your own mind and are not afraid to speak it. Eleanor looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. That is refreshing to hear. They sat in companionable silence, and Gabriel was aware of how much he had come to value these moments with her. Eleanor challenged him, made him think about things differently, pushed him to articulate ideas he had never bothered to put into words before. And she listened to him, really listened, treating his thoughts as if they mattered. It was during one of these conversations in mid-August, with the heat shimmering off the dusty streets, that things shifted between them. They had been talking about books. Eleanor was explaining a novel she had recently read, something about social reform in England, and Gabriel had been listening with genuine interest, even though he had never heard of the book or the author. "You are well read," Eleanor observed. "More than I would have expected for a ranch hand, if I am being honest." Gabriel was not offended. "My mother insisted on it. She was educated, came from a good family back east. When she married my father and moved to Texas, she brought her books with her. She taught me and my sister to read before she died." "How old were you when you lost her?" 12. "My sister was 8. The old grief, dulled by time, still ached. My father did his best after that, but he was never much for books, said they put impractical ideas in people's heads." "And yet you still read." "When I can. It is not always easy to get books out here, and I am not as fast at it as some, but I like it. Opens up worlds I will never see otherwise." Eleanor smiled. "That is exactly why I love teaching. Opening up those worlds for children who might never have access otherwise." Gabriel looked at her, at the passion in her face when she talked about teaching, at the intelligence and determination in her eyes. And he realized, with a jolt that went through his whole body, that he was falling in love with her. It was not something he had planned or even wanted, particularly. Gabriel had always figured he would marry eventually, find some practical woman who did not mind the rough life of a ranch, someone easy and uncomplicated. But Eleanor Dalton was neither easy nor uncomplicated, and he was falling for her anyway. "What is it?" Eleanor asked, noticing his sudden silence. "Nothing," Gabriel said, aware that he was lying, "just thinking." He could not tell her the truth, not yet. He had no idea if she felt anything for him beyond friendship, and he did not want to ruin what they had by declaring feelings she might not return. "About how different my life would have been if I had had a teacher like you," he said instead, which was true enough as far as it went. Eleanor seemed satisfied with that answer. They talked a while longer, and then Gabriel rode back to the ranch with his heart full of feelings he did not quite know what to do with. The situation came to a head in late September. The weather had turned cooler, with autumn coming on, and Eleanor had been teaching for nearly 3 months. The school was doing well, with attendance remaining steady and the children making real progress. Even some of the skeptical parents had become supporters, pleased with what their children were learning. But Cyrus Thorne had not given up his opposition. He had been spreading rumors around town, suggesting that Eleanor was teaching inappropriate subjects, filling the children's heads with radical ideas. It was nonsense, but enough people listened to Thorne that it caused problems. Gabriel heard about it from Samuel Hayes, who had returned to the ranch after a trip to San Francisco. "Thorne is stirring up trouble again," Hayes said as they worked together repairing fence line. "Talking about calling a special town council meeting to review the school funding. He wants to shut Miss Dalton down." Gabriel felt anger rise in his chest. On what grounds? The school is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. Thorne does not need grounds, just enough people willing to listen to him. and he has got some influence with the minors, especially the ones who drink at his saloon." Hayes paused, giving Gabriel a thoughtful look. "You are sweet on that teacher, are not you?" Gabriel saw no point in denying it. "Yes, sir, I am." "She feel the same way?" "I do not know." "We have not talked about it." Hayes nodded slowly. "Well, if you care about her, you had better do something about this situation. Thorne is not going to stop, and Miss Dalton cannot fight him alone." Gabriel knew Hayes was right. That evening he rode into Panamint and went directly to Eleanor's house. She answered his knock looking tired, her hair coming loose from its pins and ink stains on her fingers. "Gabriel, I was not expecting you." He had taken to calling her Eleanor when they were alone, and she had started using his first name in return. It was a small intimacy that meant more to him than he could say. "I heard about Thorne calling for a council meeting," he said. "I wanted to make sure you knew." Eleanor's expression hardened. "I know. Mrs. Patterson warned me this afternoon. Apparently Thorne has been working on this for weeks, building support." "What will you do?" "Attend the meeting. Defend my work. What else can I do?" She looked frustrated and tired. "I knew this would not be easy, but I had hoped that results would speak for themselves. The children are learning. Parents are pleased, but Thorne does not care about that. No, he cares about control, and you threatened that because you did not ask his permission, did not defer to him." Gabriel hesitated, then took a chance. "I want to help. Tell me how." Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. "Why, Gabriel? Why do you care so much about this?" It was the opening he had been both hoping for and dreading. Gabriel took a breath and decided to be honest. "Because I care about you. More than I probably should. More than I know what to do with. I think you are remarkable, Eleanor. Your intelligence, your determination, your refusal to compromise yourself. I have never met anyone like you, and I cannot stand by and watch Thorne try to destroy what you have built here." Eleanor's eyes widened, and for a moment she said nothing. Then, to Gabriel's surprise and relief, she smiled. "I wondered if you felt that way. I hoped you did." She stepped closer. "Because I care about you too, Gabriel Norton. You have been my ally and my friend since the day I arrived. You treat me as an equal, not as some fragile creature who needs protecting. You listen when I talk and challenge me when I am wrong. I have come to depend on that. On you." Gabriel felt something loosen in his chest, something he had not realized was tense. "So we are in agreement then? About how we feel?" "It seems we are." He wanted to kiss her, wanted it badly enough that his hands shook with the effort of holding back. But they were standing on her doorstep where anyone could see, and Eleanor had enough to deal with without adding fuel to the gossip. As if reading his thoughts, Eleanor said quietly, "Come inside. Just for a few minutes. I do not care what the busybodies think." Gabriel followed her into the little house, and as soon as the door closed behind them, Eleanor turned and kissed him. It was not tentative or shy. She kissed him with the same directness she brought to everything else, and Gabriel responded in kind, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor rested her forehead against his chest. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," she admitted. "Me too." Gabriel held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her in his arms. "Eleanor, whatever happens with Thorne and the council, I am with you. We will figure it out together." "I know." She pulled back enough to look up at him. "But I need you to understand something, Gabriel. I will not be run out of this town. I will not let Thorne win, even if it means fighting this battle until I have nothing left." "I know." "I have strong opinions," you stated, "and that is why I love you," Gabriel said, the words coming easily because they were true. He grinned at her, hoping to lighten the intensity of the moment. "That fire in you, that stubbornness, that absolute refusal to back down, that is exactly why I love you." Eleanor smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face. "You love me." "Yes, I know it is fast. I know we have not known each other long, but yes, I love you." "Good." She kissed him again, quick and sweet. "Because I love you too." They stood together in the small house, holding each other as the evening darkened outside. Gabriel knew that loving Eleanor would not be easy, that her strong opinions and fierce independence would challenge him, that life with her would never be simple or predictable. But he also knew, with absolute certainty, that he wanted that life more than anything. The town council meeting was held the following Thursday evening in the community hall. It seemed like half of Panamint showed up, curious about the controversy or eager to weigh in on whether the school should continue. Gabriel sat in the front row with Samuel Hayes, both of them there to support Eleanor. Cyrus Thorne opened the meeting with a long speech about fiscal responsibility and community values. He argued that the town could not afford to pay a teacher, that the money would be better spent on infrastructure improvements. He suggested that Eleanor was teaching inappropriate material, filling children's heads with ideas above their station. Gabriel watched Eleanor during this speech. She sat straight-backed and calm, her hands folded in her lap, her expression neutral. Only someone who knew her well would see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightening around her mouth. When Thorne finally finished, the mayor, a fair-minded man named Robert Jessup, asked Eleanor if she wanted to respond. Eleanor stood and faced the crowd. "Thank you, Mayor Jessup. I will be brief. I came to Panamint to teach children who otherwise would have no access to education. For 3 months, I have done exactly that. My students are learning to read, write, and calculate. They are learning history and geography. They are developing skills that will serve them throughout their lives, regardless of what occupation they choose." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Mr. Thorne suggests this is a waste of money and that I am teaching inappropriate material. I invite anyone who doubts me to visit the school, observe my classes, examine my curriculum. I have nothing to hide. As for the cost, my salary is modest and was agreed upon before I accepted this position. If the town truly cannot afford it, I will understand. But I believe this community can and should invest in its children's future." Several people in the crowd nodded. Mrs. Patterson stood up. "I have visited Miss Dalton's school, and my grandson has shown me what he is learning. It is proper and useful, and I see no reason to discontinue it." Others began speaking up, parents mostly, talking about how their children had improved, how they came home excited about learning, how they were starting to read and write. The tide of the meeting began to turn against Thorne. Samuel Hayes stood. "I will pledge to cover half of Miss Dalton's salary myself if necessary. Education is an investment in this town's future, and I believe it is worth supporting." Gabriel stood as well. "I will contribute too, whatever I can afford." Other men began offering money, small amounts mostly, but genuine. Thorne's face grew red with anger and frustration. He had clearly expected to win this fight easily, and now he was losing. Mayor Jessup called for a vote. The council voted 4-1 to continue funding the school, with only Thorne dissenting. There was applause from the crowd, and Eleanor smiled with obvious relief. After the meeting, as people filed out, Thorne approached Eleanor with Gabriel and Samuel Hayes standing protectively nearby. "You won this round," Thorne said, his voice low and angry. "But do not think this is over. You are not wanted here, Miss Dalton. You will realize that eventually." "I am wanted by the families whose children I teach," Eleanor replied calmly. "That is all that matters to me." Thorne glared at her, then at Gabriel. "And you, Norton, you are making a mistake backing this woman. She will bring you nothing but trouble." "No," Gabriel said, stepping closer to Eleanor. "She brought me something I did not even know I was missing. Now move along, Thorn. The meeting is over and you lost." Thorn stalked off and Eleanor let out a long breath. "Thank you, both of you." She looked at Samuel Hayes. "Sir, I cannot let you pay half my salary. That is too generous." "Nonsense. Consider it an investment. Besides, Gabriel here is one of my best hands and I reckon keeping him happy is worth something." Hayes gave Gabriel a knowing look. "I assume you two have come to an understanding." Eleanor and Gabriel exchanged glances. "Yes, sir," Gabriel said. "We have." "Good. Then I expect you will be wanting some time off eventually for a wedding. Just give me fair warning." Hayes tipped his hat to Eleanor. "Madam, you did well tonight." He left, and Gabriel and Eleanor were alone on the steps of the community hall. The night was cool and clear, stars bright overhead. "A wedding," Eleanor said thoughtfully. "He is getting ahead of himself." "Is he, though?" Gabriel asked. "I know we have not talked about specifics, but I meant what I said about loving you, and I am not a man who says such things lightly." Eleanor looked up at him. "Neither am I. But Gabriel, you need to understand what you are getting into. I will not stop teaching, even after we marry. I will not become some quiet, obedient wife who stays home and keeps house. I have work that matters to me. I know that. I would never ask you to give up teaching. That is part of who you are, and I love who you are." He took her hand. "We will figure it out together. I can help with the school, take on some of the physical work so you can focus on teaching. We can make it work." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "You really mean that? Every word?" She leaned into him, and Gabriel wrapped his arms around her. They stood like that for a long moment, taking comfort in each other's presence. "I should probably ask you properly," Gabriel said. "Eleanor Dalton, will you marry me?" "Yes," Eleanor said without hesitation. "Yes, Gabriel, I will." They were married 6 weeks later in early November. It was a simple ceremony, held in the community hall with most of the town attending. Eleanor wore a dress she had made herself, simple but elegant in cream-colored silk. Gabriel wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed. The circuit preacher performed the ceremony, and Samuel Hayes stood up as Gabriel's best man, while Mrs. Patterson stood with Eleanor. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel kissed Eleanor, with the sun streaming through the windows and their friends cheering. It was one of the happiest moments of his life. They had decided to live in Eleanor's house behind the school, at least for the time being. It was small, but it was theirs, and Gabriel found he did not mind the coziness. He continued working at the Hayes Ranch, but Samuel was understanding about giving him more flexibility to help Eleanor with the school. Their first months of marriage were an adjustment. Gabriel was used to the rough life of a ranch hand, eating simple food and living in a bunkhouse with other men. Eleanor was used to independence, to managing her own time and space. But they learned to compromise, to make room for each other's needs and preferences. Gabriel found that he enjoyed being married, enjoyed coming home to Eleanor each evening and hearing about her day. He liked the way she sought his opinion on things, the way they could talk for hours about anything and everything. And he loved the private moments, the intimacy they shared, the way Eleanor trusted him completely. Eleanor, for her part, seemed to bloom in their marriage. She had always been confident, but now there was an ease to her, a contentment that came from being with someone who supported and understood her. She continued teaching with the same passion and dedication, but she no longer had to face every challenge alone. Winter came, cold and hard in the mountains. Gabriel made sure Eleanor's house was well sealed against the wind, that there was always wood for the stove. The school continued through the cold months, though attendance sometimes dropped when storms made travel dangerous. Eleanor was endlessly patient with her students, reteaching lessons when children missed days, making sure no one fell behind. Cyrus Thorne remained a presence in town, still hostile but less openly so after losing the council vote. He mostly ignored Eleanor now, which was a relief. Gabriel kept an eye on him anyway, not trusting the man to let go of his grudge completely. Spring arrived in 1879, bringing warmth and wildflowers to the mountains. Eleanor discovered she was pregnant in early April, and Gabriel was overjoyed. They had talked about children, both wanting them eventually, but the reality of it was more thrilling than Gabriel had imagined. "Are you happy?" Eleanor asked him one evening as they sat together after dinner. She had her hand on her still flat stomach, a gesture Gabriel had noticed was becoming habitual. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Gabriel said honestly. "You and now a baby. It is more than I ever dreamed of." "Even though your wife is stubborn and opinionated and insists on continuing to teach even while pregnant?" Eleanor asked with a teasing smile, especially because of that. Gabriel pulled her close. "Though I am going to insist, you let me help more as you get further along. I do not want you exhausting yourself." "I will be reasonable," Eleanor promised. "But I am not going to stop teaching just because I am expecting. Women have been having babies and working throughout history." "I know, but you are my wife, and I am allowed to worry about you." Eleanor kissed him. "You are, and I love you for it." The baby, a boy they named William after Gabriel's father, was born in December of 1879. It was a difficult birth, long and painful, and Gabriel spent the hours pacing outside the house while Mrs. Patterson attended Eleanor. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Patterson let him in to find Eleanor exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Meet your son," she said. Gabriel sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face peeking out of the blankets. William had dark hair and was red-faced from crying, but to Gabriel he was perfect. "He is beautiful," Gabriel whispered. "He is loud," Eleanor said with a tired laugh. "But yes, beautiful." Gabriel stayed with her through the night, watching as she nursed the baby, marveling at how naturally she took to motherhood despite never having done it before. When William finally slept, Gabriel held him while Eleanor rested. "I love you," he told her softly. "Thank you for this, for him, for everything." Eleanor smiled without opening her eyes. "I love you too, husband, even when you wake me up to tell me sentimental things." Gabriel laughed quietly and settled into the chair by the bed, his son in his arms and his wife sleeping peacefully. He thought about how much his life had changed since that day, almost 2 years ago, when he had helped a sharp-tongued teacher carry her trunk to the schoolhouse. He had not known then that he was meeting the woman who would change everything, who would challenge him and love him and give him a family. Eleanor took the winter off from teaching to recover and care for William. But by spring, she was back at the school with the baby in a cradle in the corner of the classroom. The students loved having an infant to coo over during breaks, and William seemed content to sleep or watch the proceedings with wide eyes. Gabriel helped more than ever, chopping wood, carrying water, and watching William when Eleanor needed both hands for teaching. Samuel Hayes was understanding about Gabriel's divided attention, and eventually offered him a different position managing supplies and equipment for the ranch, work that kept him closer to town and allowed more regular hours. The years passed peacefully. William grew into a curious, energetic toddler. The school thrived, with enrollment increasing as more families moved to Panamint. Eleanor's reputation as an excellent teacher spread, and even some of the families from neighboring towns began sending their children to her. In 1882, Eleanor had a second child, a daughter they named Caroline. She was easier than William had been, a calm baby who slept well and smiled often. Gabriel doted on both his children, amazed daily that they were his. Cyrus Thorne died in 1883 from a combination of drink and a weak heart. Gabriel was not sorry to see him go, and Eleanor admitted to relief that his opposition was finally ended. The new head of the town council was actively supportive of the school, and funding was increased to allow Eleanor to hire an assistant teacher. Life was good. Gabriel and Eleanor had their struggles, as all couples do. Eleanor's strong opinions sometimes clashed with Gabriel's quieter approach to problems. They argued about money sometimes, about how to discipline the children, about 100 small things that married people argue about. But they always came back to each other, always remembered that they were partners in this life. By 1885, Panamint was starting to decline, as the silver veins played out and miners moved on to new strikes. But a core population remained, people who had built homes and businesses and intended to stay. The school remained important, and Eleanor continued teaching, now with her assistant handling some of the younger children while Eleanor focused on the older students. Gabriel had become Samuel Hayes's right-hand man, essentially co-managing the ranch. Hayes, getting older and spending more time away, trusted Gabriel completely. It was secure work with good pay, and it allowed Gabriel to provide well for his family. One evening in late summer, Gabriel and Eleanor sat on the porch of their house watching William, now 6, and Caroline, age 3, play in the yard. Eleanor was pregnant again, due in the winter, and she rested her hands on her swollen belly. "Do you ever regret it?" Gabriel asked. "Coming to Panamint, marrying me, living this rough life instead of staying back east where things were more civilized." Eleanor looked at him with surprise. "Never. Why would I? I just wonder sometimes. You could have had an easier life, married someone with more money, more status." "And been bored out of my mind," Eleanor said firmly. "Gabriel, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You let me be myself, support my work, share the load of raising our children. You treat me as an equal partner, not as property or a decoration. Why would I ever regret that?" "I have strong opinions about that," Gabriel said with a grin. "You stated you liked being treated as an equal, and that is why I love you." Eleanor laughed. "You are never going to let me forget that conversation, are you?" "Never. It was the moment I knew for sure that you were the one for me." "Well, for what it is worth, I knew it too. When you did not flinch away from my opinions, when you smiled instead of being threatened, I knew you were different." She reached for his hand. "I knew I could love you." They sat together as the sun set, painting the mountains gold and orange. William chased Caroline in circles until both children collapsed in giggles. Gabriel thought about that first day when Eleanor had stepped off the stagecoach, how she had seemed so formidable and out of place in the rough mining town. But she had not been out of place. She had been exactly where she needed to be, where she was meant to be, where they both were meant to be. The third child, another son they named James, arrived in January of 1886. Like his siblings, he was healthy and strong, and Eleanor recovered well. Gabriel marveled at her resilience, at how she managed to be a mother, a wife, and a teacher all at once without losing herself in any of those roles. As James grew, the pattern of their life continued. Eleanor taught, Gabriel worked at the ranch and helped with the school, and their children grew up surrounded by books and learning and love. William proved to be especially bright, reading by age 4 and constantly asking questions about everything. Caroline was more artistic, always drawing or making up stories. James, as he got older, showed a talent for numbers that reminded Gabriel of Eleanor's analytical mind. By 1890, Gabriel was 38 and Eleanor was 35. They had been married for 11 years, and those years had been full and rich. Panamint had stabilized into a small but steady town, no longer booming but not quite bust either. The school remained a central institution, and Eleanor's reputation as a teacher had become legendary in the region. Samuel Hayes retired that year and sold the ranch to Gabriel, offering terms so generous that Gabriel suspected the old man was essentially giving it to him. Gabriel was overwhelmed by the gift, but accepted it with gratitude. It meant security for his family, a legacy he could pass on to his children. "You have earned it," Hayes said when Gabriel tried to thank him. "You have been more than an employee. You have been like a son to me. I want to know the ranch is in good hands, and yours are the best hands I know." With ownership of the ranch came new responsibilities, but also new opportunities. Gabriel hired good men to work the cattle and handle the daily operations while he focused on management and business. It meant he could spend even more time with Eleanor and the children, could be more involved in their daily lives. Eleanor, meanwhile, continued to expand the school's curriculum. She introduced more advanced classes for older students, including literature, sciences, and even basic Latin. She corresponded with educators back east, staying current on new teaching methods. Her students regularly outperformed children from larger towns when they moved away or went on to further education. One afternoon in the spring of 1892, Gabriel was working in his office at the ranch when a rider brought a telegram from San Francisco. Gabriel opened it with curiosity and then growing excitement. It was from a teachers' college, inviting Eleanor to speak at their annual conference about her methods and experiences teaching in rural communities. Gabriel rode into town immediately to share the news. He found Eleanor in the schoolhouse, supervising as the older students worked through mathematics problems. She looked up when he entered, and he waved the telegram. "You have to see this." They stepped outside, and Gabriel handed her the telegram. Eleanor read it twice, her expression shifting from surprise to excitement to worry. "Gabriel, this is wonderful, but I cannot possibly go. It is in San Francisco. It would take days to get there and back, and I cannot leave the school." "Your assistant can manage for a week," Gabriel said. "And I can help if needed. Eleanor, this is an honor. They want to hear from you to learn from what you have accomplished. You should go." "Come with me," Eleanor said suddenly. "We could make a trip of it, see the city, spend time together without the children for once. Mrs. Patterson could watch them, and your men can handle the ranch." Gabriel considered this. It had been years since he and Eleanor had gone anywhere alone together. The idea was appealing. "All right," he said. "Let us do it. A trip to San Francisco for both of us." They made the trip in early June. The journey by stagecoach and train was long but not unpleasant, and it gave them time to talk, really talk, in a way that was difficult at home with 3 children and constant responsibilities. San Francisco amazed them both. The city was so different from Panamint, from anywhere they had lived. Buildings rose multiple stories high, streets were paved, electric lights were beginning to appear. There were theaters, restaurants, shops selling goods from around the world. It was exciting and overwhelming all at once. Eleanor's speech at the teachers' college was a triumph. She spoke about the challenges and rewards of teaching in isolated communities, about adapting curriculum to meet practical needs while still maintaining high standards. Her passion and knowledge were evident, and the audience responded with enthusiasm. Afterward, several people approached her with questions and compliments. Gabriel watched from the back of the room, proud beyond words. This was the woman he had married, the woman he loved. Still opinionated, still strong-willed, but now recognized and respected for the educator she was. That evening, as they walked through the city streets back to their hotel, Eleanor was quiet. "What are you thinking?" Gabriel asked. "That I could have stayed here," Eleanor said. Back when I was young and unmarried, I could have gotten a position at a school like that, lived in a city like this. It would have been easier in many ways. Gabriel felt a flutter of worry. Do you wish you had? Eleanor stopped walking and turned to face him. The gaslight from a nearby street lamp cast shadows across her face, but her eyes were clear and certain. No, not for 1 second. She took his hands. Gabriel, today was wonderful, being recognized for my work, hearing that my methods might help other teachers, that was deeply satisfying. But it was one day. My life, our life together in Panamint, that is everything. You, our children, the students I have taught over the years, the community we are part of, that is real and lasting and meaningful in a way that no amount of recognition could ever replace. Gabriel pulled her close and kissed her right there on the street, not caring who saw. I love you, he said when they parted. God, Eleanor, I love you so much. I love you too, she said. And I am very glad I have strong opinions about things like love and marriage and what makes a good life. Otherwise, I might have talked myself out of the best decision I ever made. They returned to Panamint a week later to find their children healthy and happy, the school running smoothly, and the ranch in good order. Life resumed its familiar pattern, but with a renewed appreciation for what they had built together. The years continued to pass. William grew into a serious young man who loved learning as much as his mother did. At 18, in 1897, he left for college in San Francisco, the first in either of their families to pursue higher education. Gabriel and Eleanor were both proud and sad to see him go, but they knew it was right. Caroline, at 16, was developing into a talented artist. She had begun selling her drawings and paintings to people in town and was talking about possibly going to art school. Gabriel encouraged her, wanting his daughter to have every opportunity to pursue her passions. James, at 11, was still finding his way, but he showed promise in mathematics and business. Gabriel suspected he might end up running the ranch someday if that was what he wanted. Eleanor continued teaching, though she talked sometimes about slowing down. She was 42 now, and while still energetic and passionate about education, she felt the years more than she used to. Gabriel, at 45, was also starting to feel his age. Ranch work was harder than it had been in his 20s, and he was grateful to have good men working for him who could handle the physical labor. One evening in the fall of 1898, after a long day of work, Gabriel and Eleanor sat together in their house. The children were in their rooms and the house was quiet. Eleanor was reading a book while Gabriel went over accounts. You ever think about the future? Eleanor asked suddenly. About what comes after teaching, after raising children? Gabriel set down his pencil. Sometimes. What are you thinking? That we have worked hard for a long time. That maybe eventually we might want to slow down, enjoy life a bit more, travel perhaps, see some of the places we have only read about. I would like that, Gabriel said, though I cannot imagine you truly retiring. You would go mad without students to teach, Eleanor laughed. Perhaps you are right, but maybe I could teach less, focus on the students who really need me and spend more time on other things, on us. Gabriel moved to sit beside her, pulling her close. I like that idea, more time for us. They sat together in comfortable silence, and Gabriel thought about how lucky he was. 20 years ago, he had been a ranch hand with no particular prospects, no grand plans for his future. Then Eleanor had stepped off a stagecoach, all sharp opinions and fierce determination, and everything had changed. She had challenged him, pushed him to be better, to think more deeply, to stand up for what mattered. She had loved him despite, or perhaps because of his quiet nature, had built a life with him that was richer than anything he could have imagined alone. I have strong opinions about growing old with you, Gabriel said softly. I think it is going to be the best part of my life." Eleanor smiled and kissed him. "Mine too, Cowboy, mine too." The new century arrived in 1900, and with it came changes. Panamint was shrinking as more people left for newer opportunities. The school enrollment was down to about 10 students, mostly from the families who had put down deep roots. Eleanor talked seriously about closing the school, about finally retiring after 22 years of teaching. Gabriel supported whatever decision she made. They had saved money over the years, lived simply despite having the resources to do otherwise. They could afford for Eleanor to stop working, could afford to help their children with their own endeavors, could even afford to travel if they wanted. In the spring of 1900, Eleanor taught her last class. It was a small ceremony, just the families of her current students and some of the older students who had come back to town to honor her. People spoke about what Eleanor's teaching had meant to them, how it had changed their lives, given them opportunities they would never have had otherwise. Gabriel listened to the testimonials with tears in his eyes. He had always known Eleanor was an exceptional teacher, but hearing others speak about her impact made him realize just how much she had accomplished. When it was his turn to speak, Gabriel stood and looked at his wife. 22 years ago, I carried Eleanor's trunk to the schoolhouse and thought I was just doing a good deed for a stranger. I had no idea I was meeting the woman who would become my wife, the mother of my children, my partner in everything. Eleanor came to Panamint to teach children, and she did that better than anyone could have hoped. But she also taught me. She taught me that strong opinions and firm convictions are not weaknesses but strengths. She taught me that love means supporting each other's dreams, not limiting them. She taught me that a good life is built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. He paused, looking at Eleanor's face, seeing the tears on her cheeks. When we first met, Eleanor stated that she had strong opinions, and I grinned and told her that was why I loved her. I meant it then, and I mean it even more now. Her strength, her intelligence, her refusal to compromise her principles, those are the things that make her remarkable. And I am grateful every day that she chose to share her life with me. The gathering applauded, and Eleanor came to stand beside Gabriel. She kissed him in front of everyone, not caring about propriety, and Gabriel held her close. After closing the school, Eleanor did not quite retire as she had planned. She offered private tutoring to children who needed extra help, wrote letters to educators around the country sharing her methods, and even began writing a book about her experiences teaching in rural communities. Gabriel helped with the research, editing her drafts and offering suggestions. They traveled too, taking the trips they had always talked about. They went to San Francisco several times to visit William, who had graduated from college and was working as an engineer. They traveled east to Boston so Eleanor could show Gabriel where she had grown up. They even made a trip to Texas, so Gabriel could show her the land where he had been born, though most of his family was long gone. Caroline married in 1902 at age 21, wedding a young man from Sacramento who appreciated her artistic talent and encouraged her work. The wedding was held in Panamint with friends and family from all over the region attending. Gabriel walked his daughter down the aisle with mixed emotions, proud of the woman she had become, but sad to let her go. James, at 16, was working at the ranch and showing real aptitude for the business. Gabriel began teaching him everything he knew, preparing him to eventually take over. It gave Gabriel satisfaction to know that the ranch Hayes had entrusted to him would stay in the family. The years of the early 1900s were peaceful ones for Gabriel and Eleanor. They were not young anymore, Gabriel approaching 50 and Eleanor in her late 40s, but they were healthy and content. Their marriage had deepened over the years, moving beyond the passion of early love into something more profound. A true partnership built on respect, trust, and genuine affection. They still argued sometimes. Eleanor still had strong opinions, and Gabriel still occasionally pushed back when he thought she was wrong. But they had learned how to fight fair, how to disagree without damaging each other, how to always come back to the love that had brought them together. One evening in 1905, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset. It was something they had done countless times over the years, but it never got old. The mountains turned purple and gold, and the air cooled after the heat of the day. "Do you remember the first time we sat together like this?" Eleanor asked. "It was after that town council meeting when Thorne tried to shut down the school." "I remember," Gabriel said. "I was terrified you would say no when I asked you to marry me." "I could never have said no to you," Eleanor said. "Even then, I knew you were special. You saw me, really saw me, not just what I could do or what I looked like, but who I actually was. That is a rare thing, Gabriel. You made it easy to see you. You never hid, never pretended to be something you were not." Gabriel took her hand. "That was one of the first things I loved about you." They sat in comfortable silence, and Gabriel thought about all the years they had shared, all the joys and challenges and ordinary moments that made up a life together. He thought about the children they had raised, the work they had done, the community they had been part of. "I would do it all again," he said suddenly. "Every moment, every struggle, every triumph, I would choose you again and again." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "So would I, Cowboy, so would I." As the sun dipped below the mountains, Gabriel pulled Eleanor close, and they watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. They had built something together, something lasting and real. A family, a home, a life full of love and meaning. And it had all started with a sharp-tongued teacher stepping off a stagecoach and a cowboy willing to carry her trunk. Sometimes, Gabriel thought, the best things in life came from the smallest decisions, the simplest gestures of kindness. He was grateful for every one of them. The years rolled on into the 1910s. Panamint had become even smaller, more of a ghost town than a functioning community. Many buildings stood empty, their windows broken and their doors hanging open. But a core group of families remained, including Gabriel and Eleanor, too attached to the place and its history to leave. William came back to visit regularly, bringing with him stories of the growing city of San Francisco, of new technologies and changing times. He had married a woman named Helen, and they had given Gabriel and Eleanor 2 grandchildren, a boy and a girl. Gabriel loved being a grandfather, loved the way his grandchildren looked at him with wide-eyed wonder when he told them stories. Caroline had moved to Sacramento with her husband and had become a respected artist, her paintings selling in galleries up and down California. She had one son, a quiet boy named after Gabriel. Eleanor adored him, loved watching him discover the world. James had married a local woman, Martha, and they had settled at the ranch. James had proven to be an excellent manager, and Gabriel had gradually turned over more and more responsibility to him. By 1912, James was essentially running the operation while Gabriel served as an advisor. It gave Gabriel freedom he had never had before, time to spend with Eleanor, to pursue interests he had never had time for. He read more, often discussing books with Eleanor late into the night. They took long walks through the desert, watching the seasons change in the subtle ways of the high desert. In 1915, Eleanor finally finished her book about teaching in rural communities. It was published by a small press in San Francisco, and while it did not become a bestseller, it was well received by educators. Eleanor received letters from teachers all over the West, thanking her for her insights and inspiration. Gabriel was immensely proud of her accomplishment. He watched as she read those letters, saw the satisfaction in her face at knowing her work would continue to influence education even though she had stopped teaching. "You have made a real difference," he told her one evening as she finished reading another grateful letter. "Not just to the children you taught directly, but to all the children those teachers will reach using your methods." Eleanor smiled. "I have lived a good life, Gabriel. I have done work that mattered, raised wonderful children, and loved a good man. What more could anyone ask for?" "Nothing," Gabriel said. "Nothing at all." They were in their 60s now, Gabriel 63 and Eleanor 60. They moved a bit slower, tired a bit easier, but they were still vital and engaged with life. Their love had not diminished with age. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by years of partnership and mutual support. One day in the spring of 1917, they received word that Samuel Hayes had died peacefully in San Francisco at the age of 84. Gabriel was saddened by the news but grateful that Hayes had lived a long, full life. He arranged to travel to San Francisco for the funeral, and Eleanor came with him. At the service, Gabriel spoke about what Hayes had meant to him, how the older man had given him opportunities, had trusted him with the ranch, had treated him like family. He talked about how Hayes's generosity had made possible everything Gabriel had built in his life. Afterward, Hayes's lawyer pulled Gabriel aside and informed him that Hayes had left him a substantial sum in his will, along with a letter. Gabriel opened the letter that evening in their hotel room while Eleanor sat beside him. The letter was brief, but heartfelt. Hayes wrote about how proud he had been to know Gabriel, how he had watched Gabriel grow from a young ranch hand into a successful businessman and devoted family man. He expressed his gratitude for the way Gabriel had cared for the ranch and for the friendship they had shared over the years. "You proved to me," Hayes had written, "that character matters more than background, that a man of integrity and dedication can achieve anything. Thank you for being the son I never had, and for making an old man's last years full of pride and satisfaction." Gabriel finished reading with tears running down his face. Eleanor held him while he cried, and when he finally composed himself, she kissed his forehead. "He loved you," she said simply, "and you honored that love with how you lived your life." Gabriel nodded, unable to speak. He folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket, a final gift from a man who had changed his life. They returned to Panamint to find spring in full bloom. The desert had received good rains that year, and wildflowers covered the hills in waves of gold and purple. Gabriel and Eleanor took long walks through the flowers, marveling at the beauty. "We should plant a garden," Eleanor said one afternoon. "A real one with vegetables and flowers both. We have the time now, and I think I would enjoy it." Gabriel agreed, and they spent the next several weeks preparing soil, planting seeds, and building trellises for climbing plants. It was good work, productive and satisfying. Gabriel enjoyed working alongside Eleanor, their hands in the dirt, planning and planting together. The garden thrived, producing tomatoes and squash and beans, along with roses and daisies and sweet peas. Eleanor loved it, spent hours tending the plants and harvesting the produce. Gabriel loved watching her, loved seeing her happiness in this new endeavor. They settled into a rhythm of life that suited their age and circumstances. Mornings were for the garden and light chores. Afternoons were for reading, writing letters to their children and grandchildren, or simply sitting together. Evenings were for conversation, for reminiscing about the past and dreaming about the future. "We have had a good run," Gabriel said one evening as they sat on their porch. "Better than most people get." "We have," Eleanor agreed, "and we are not done yet." There is still life to live, grandchildren to watch grow, places to see. Gabriel smiled. Always planning ahead, that is my Eleanor. Our Eleanor, she corrected. I belong to you as much as to myself. That is what marriage means. And I to you, Gabriel said. He took her hand and held it, feeling the slight tremor of age in her fingers, the familiar shape of her palm against his. I love you, Eleanor Norton. I have loved you for almost 40 years, and I will love you until I draw my last breath. And I love you, Gabriel. My cowboy, my partner, my best friend. Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for seeing me all those years ago, for loving the parts of me that others found difficult or inconvenient. Thank you for building this life with me. It has been my honor, Gabriel said softly. They sat together as the light faded and the stars came out. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. A marriage, a family, a legacy of love and education and hard work. As the years passed into the 1920s, Gabriel and Eleanor slowed down but never stopped living fully. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, with their children and grandchildren gathered around them. William gave a speech about his parents' marriage, about how they had modeled what true partnership looked like. Caroline painted a portrait of them together that captured not just their physical appearance but something deeper. The connection between them, the love that had sustained them through 4 decades. James presented them with a leather-bound album, filled with photographs and letters from people whose lives Eleanor had touched through her teaching. There were messages from former students who had become teachers themselves, businessmen, mothers, farmers, all of them crediting Eleanor with giving them the foundation they needed to succeed in life. Eleanor cried as she paged through the album, overwhelmed by the evidence of her impact. Gabriel watched her with tears in his own eyes, grateful that she could see how much she had mattered, how much she still mattered. I have strong opinions, Eleanor said during the celebration, her voice wavering with emotion. I always have. I have opinions about education, about women's rights, about how to live a good life. And this cowboy, she gestured at Gabriel, he has loved me for those opinions, not despite them. That has made all the difference. Gabriel pulled her close and kissed her in front of their family. That is what I told you all those years ago, and it is still true today. Your strength, your intelligence, your refusal to be anything less than yourself, those are the reasons I love you. They always will be. The family applauded, and the celebration continued late into the evening. Gabriel looked around at the people gathered in their home, at the children and grandchildren who existed, because he had chosen to help a sharp-tongued teacher carry her trunk so many years ago, and he felt complete. This was what life was about, he thought. Not grand adventures or dramatic moments, though those had their place, but rather the accumulation of small choices, of daily acts of love and support, of building something lasting with another person who saw you clearly and loved you anyway. He had been blessed beyond measure, and he knew it. As they grew older, Gabriel and Eleanor began to make plans for their final years. They updated their wills, making sure their children would be provided for, and that Eleanor's collection of teaching materials would be donated to the Teachers' College in San Francisco. They talked about what they wanted for their funerals, where they wanted to be buried, all the practical matters that needed addressing. It was not morbid, just realistic. They were both in their 70s now, Gabriel 71 and Eleanor 68. They had lived longer than many people of their generation, and they were grateful for every year. But they also knew their time was finite, and they wanted to be prepared. I want to be buried next to you, Eleanor said one afternoon as they worked in their garden. Here in Panamint, where we built our life together. That was my thought too, Gabriel said. This is our home. This is where we belong." They chose a spot on a hill overlooking the town with a view of the mountains they had loved for so many years. They arranged for simple headstones, nothing fancy, just their names and the years of their lives. "And one more thing," Eleanor said. "On my stone I wanted to say she had strong opinions and she was loved for them." Gabriel smiled. "Perfect." "And on mine, he loved a woman with strong opinions, and it made his life complete." They held hands in the garden, surrounded by the flowers and vegetables they had planted together, and felt at peace with whatever time they had left. Gabriel's health began to decline in 1925. It was nothing dramatic, just a gradual slowing down, a weakness that settled into his bones. The doctor in the nearest large town could not find anything specific, just told him that he was wearing out, that his body had worked hard for 73 years and was tired. Eleanor cared for him with the same dedication she had brought to teaching and motherhood. She made sure he ate well, got enough rest, stayed comfortable. Their children visited frequently, and the grandchildren came to sit with their grandfather and hear his stories. Gabriel accepted what was happening with equanimity. He had lived a good life, a full life. He had loved and been loved. He had no regrets. One evening in late summer, as the sun set over the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Gabriel asked Eleanor to sit with him on the porch one more time. She helped him outside and settled beside him, holding his hand. The air was warm and the scent of roses drifted from their garden. "I love you," Gabriel said. His voice was weak, but his meaning was clear. "Thank you for 46 years of marriage, for our children, for everything." "I love you too," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me." "I have strong opinions about dying," Gabriel said with a faint smile. "I think it is all right as long as I have lived well, and I have, Eleanor. Because of you, I have lived so well. You made my life complete," Eleanor whispered. "You gave me everything I needed, everything I wanted, a partner, a friend, a love that sustained me through everything." They sat together as the sun disappeared and the stars emerged. Gabriel's breathing grew slower, more labored. Eleanor held his hand and talked softly about their life together, about the day they met, about their wedding, about their children and the ranch and the school. She reminded him of all the good moments, all the love they had shared. As the night deepened, Gabriel squeezed Eleanor's hand one last time and let out a soft breath. And then he was gone, peaceful and painless, with the woman he loved beside him and the stars above. Eleanor sat with him for a long time, holding his hand and crying softly. She thought about that first day when he had offered to help her, about how that simple act of kindness had led to everything that came after. She thought about his grin when she had told him she had strong opinions, about the way he had said that was why he loved her. She had been loved well by a good man, and for that she would be forever grateful. Gabriel Norton was buried on the hill overlooking Panamint with a simple stone that read, Gabriel Norton, 1852–1925. He loved a woman with strong opinions and it made his life complete. Eleanor lived for 3 more years after Gabriel's death. She stayed in their house, tending the garden they had planted together, writing letters to her children and grandchildren. She was lonely without Gabriel, but she was not unhappy. She had memories enough to fill a lifetime, and she held them close. She spent her last years working on a memoir, not for publication but for her family. She wrote about her life, about growing up in Boston, about coming west to teach, about meeting Gabriel and falling in love. She wrote about their marriage, their children, the community they had been part of. She wrote honestly about the struggles and the joys, about the way love deepened and changed over time. On a cool morning in October 1928, Eleanor Norton died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73. Her children found her with a smile on her face, her hands folded over a photograph of Gabriel taken on their wedding day. They buried her next to her husband on the hill with a stone that read, Eleanor Dalton Norton, 1855–1928. She had strong opinions and she was loved for them. The two graves sat side by side, overlooking the town where they had built their life together, under the sky they had watched so many evenings, surrounded by the mountains they had loved. And though they were gone, their legacy remained in the children and grandchildren who carried their values forward, in the students Eleanor had taught who went on to educate others, in the ranch that continued to thrive under James's management. Gabriel and Eleanor Norton had lived ordinary lives in an extraordinary way. They had loved deeply, worked hard, and built something lasting. They had faced challenges with courage and celebrated joys with gratitude. And in the end, they had left the world better than they found it, which is all anyone can hope to do. Their story became a legend in Panamint and the surrounding area, told and retold by those who remembered them. The story of a teacher with strong opinions and the cowboy who loved her for them, who built a life together based on mutual respect and genuine partnership, who showed that love at its best is not about changing someone but about supporting them in being fully themselves. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blows through the valley and the sun sets over the mountains, people say they can still feel their presence. Two souls who loved each other well and were together again in whatever comes after, still holding hands, still watching the stars, still grateful for every moment they had been blessed to share. The end.